Hi, and welcome to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Today, we are talking about organ donation awareness. April is Organ Donation Awareness Month in Canada, and we are dedicating every single show in April to organ donation awareness. If you haven't done so already, please go to beadonor.ca and register to be an organ donor. It only takes a couple of minutes. I can attest to that because a few years ago, I thought that my driver's license or whatever I signed when I was 21 years old was still valid, and found out that in fact it wasn't, that you need to go to beadonor.ca and register to be an organ donor. Canada doesn't have a very high organ donor sign up. And it would be really nice if we could increase that number. And through the month of April, through Green Shirt Day and the Logan Boulet effect, we have increased the numbers. So if you'd like to hear any of the previous shows that we've done about organ donation, the stories of donors, the stories of people who have received organs and how wonderful their lives have been since they received their organ, you can go to our YouTube channel at Fresh Waves Radio, and all of the past podcasts and broadcasts are there. Today, we are happy to have Sue McKenzie. She is the president of the Kidney Patient and Donor Alliance of Canada. And after I said that mouthful, we will continue to call it the Kidney Alliance of Canada. Good morning, Sue, and thank you for coming to Fresh Waves.
Good morning, Bren. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here and talk about this.
Well, I'm glad that you could talk to us about this. You are, in fact, a kidney recipient yourself, aren't you? Tell us about how you became involved in all of these things.
Yes. Well, it's kind of like you try to turn what they say lemons into lemonade. So I am part of a kidney family. We've had genetic kidney disease in my family for 4 generations, an unknown form of kidney disease, which we just discovered 2 years ago. But I knew that I had kidney disease in my family, and I was getting tested every year just to make sure I didn't have it. And one year I went to the doctor, and he was informed that actually I did have, I was showing signs of kidney problems, which continued. And I ultimately had a transplant. Ultimately my kidneys failed in about 14 years ago, and I had a kidney transplant 13 years ago from a living donor. And that was, obviously a profound experience that impacted me. But since we found the gene, I've discovered that 2 of my 3 daughters also have kidney disease.
Oh, no.
And, and one of them has had a kidney transplant, in the last few years. And her outcomes were so much better because I was able to share what I knew and what I had gone through. And she ended up getting the best possible outcome, which is a kidney transplant before she even had to go on dialysis. And she's actually been able to have 2 little children since her transplant.
Oh, fabulous.
And, and her story's just been amazing. And I felt like more people really need to benefit from the knowledge and the hindsight that we all have. Like, I just saw what having an advocate did for her and the advantage that she had. Now, obviously, you don't see kidney disease as an advantage, but if you have it and you're aware of it and you are proactive and you get informed, you can still have a great life. And that's, I think a key message for us.
Well, you can also get the help that you need in a timely fashion. It's not like you go into the hospital or for a doctor's appointment and they say, wow, your blood pressure's high. And then you get your blood work done and they say, wow, your creatinine levels are really high. And then you're in a crisis situation. If you can get it before you get to the crisis, you're also healthier when you have the transplant, which means the outcome is going to be that much better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, part of the challenge is the kidney disease is kind of a silent disease. So as you're getting sicker, the main symptoms are just, fatigue, nausea, that just get kind of worse and worse. So oftentimes, a general, your family doctor is not necessarily going to detect it. So if you do have a family history of it, it's important to let people know if you have, high blood pressure or diabetes, those would contribute to it. But the good news is that, I think some people I've talked to take the approach that, I'll deal with it, when it happens. I'll deal with it if my kidneys fail. But the reality is that there's so many new and effective medications out there. that if you know that you can get, some medications that can delay or prevent the onset of kidney failure. So you want to know and you want to do something about it is really the message there.
Yeah. Did you end up being on dialysis before you had your transplant?
I did. And, and in hindsight, I think if I'd have known more, I may not have needed to be on dialysis. I had several donors being worked up that I didn't know because it was genetic. None of my bloodline, my family members were able to donate because they didn't know who might have the gene. We didn't know what the gene was at that point. And so it limited my pool, and my donors ended up being friends and, in-laws. My actual donor was my husband's sister. And so I had a number of people who were being worked up, but because of the kind of the curtain, and the lack of communication that happens for ethical reasons between the donor workup side and the recipient side, I didn't understand how close they were to being approved to be my donors. And so when the doctor asked, don't you think we should be looking at dialysis at this point? Like, I didn't know enough to figure out how, to ask the right questions. And I agreed, but really they were literally, a month or two away from being approved. And had I known that, I probably wouldn't have gone on dialysis at that point.
Well, for sure. That just seems to be a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I guess in what we have found, or what I have found personally from doing all these interviews for the last 10 years, is that people are absolutely willing to help, willing to speak. They just have to be asked, and they have to be asked the right questions. Yeah. So I also have found that people who have been given an organ have a completely different, by and large, a completely different outlook on life. Mm-hmm. And they treat life as a precious gift. And they do wonderful things. Like, you could be doing all kinds of other things in your life, yet you are choosing to be the president of a not-for-profit organization and becoming someone else's voice and advocating for people who need someone to help them. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to navigate your own bus when you're the one who's ill.
It's true. And with kidney disease, like many diseases, the sicker you get, the harder it is, you actually have a brain fog that sets in. You're just trying to survive. It's hard to be your own advocate in end-stage kidney failure. And I could have used an advocate to help me think through some of those things. And so for us, as transplant recipients, who understand that, to be able to help other people and to share our knowledge. And as I mentioned, our hindsight, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the questions to ask, because most of us, not some have more than one transplant, but most of us only go through this once if we're lucky. And no one else gets to really benefit from the things that we've learned. Everyone else is going through it for the first time and trying to figure it out and trying to navigate this really complex landscape. I mean, I talked to one patient who, was informed that they had renal disease, and the response was, well, what's a renal? Like, I mean, the language itself is, it's a whole new language. You start to hear about renal disease and nephrologists and, all of these things that just become almost inaccessible from the beginning. So the more you know, and the more awareness that you have, and that you can have a champion and somebody to talk with about this and go to your appointments with you, and it's so important. And that's what I was able to do with my daughter, whereas I went to all my appointments alone, while I was working, and just rushing back and not really
absorbing,
understanding. Yeah.
Well, they say that when you're in a tense situation, and being told you have kidney disease is a tense situation, you're only absorbing 2% of what you hear. Mm-hmm. I mean, in radio land here, we always say that in order for someone to really get your commercial, they have to hear it 20 times. You get one opportunity to go into a nephrologist's office, and people always say, what the heck is that? That's a kidney doctor. So you go into the kidney doctor's office. You've got one chance. That's a very busy person, and they're going to move on to the next patient. And when you ask if you can have another appointment, you're going to be waiting a few months before you get that other appointment. And all you need to do is ask a few questions that you didn't ask when you were there because you just don't think about it.
That's right. Or you get sidetracked by, your latest test or something else that you're informed about. And, that's why we always encourage people to take a notepad. I mean, I take a notepad to every meeting, and it's the same thing, take a notepad when you go to the doctor and write it down and write your questions down in advance. And sometimes people walk out of those meetings still not understanding the answer that they were given. And, again, keep asking those questions until you get an answer that you understand.
Yes.
And that's really important, because you can't be your own advocate and you can't get the best outcomes if you don't kind of take control of your healthcare. And if you can't do that, like I said, then get an advocate, get somebody, a friend, a family member to go with you.
Now, do you think that your organization will one day offer those kinds of advocates to go with people who have no one?
Well, it is something that we've talked about. The Alliance is really, we're really unlike other kidney groups out there. I developed the Alliance as a group of action, like to mobilize and organize patients and living donors who are as passionate about this as we are as recipients and our family members. To be able to get involved, to be able to advocate for themselves and for others in an organized way. And I think that's super important. So our first project was actually the Transplant Ambassador Program, which has 200 volunteers across Ontario now, and we're launching in the Atlantic provinces this month as well. And it's all grassroots, patient-led, patient-managed. We're all we're all either transplant recipients or living kidney donors who are giving who are providing our personal experiences and sharing them with other people so that they don't feel alone. So they realize that, one, other people have gone through this and here are their learnings. And two, this is important that I need to understand this, that the more I know, the better my outcome is going to be. And to, being in denial is the worst possible thing, for any disease, and especially for kidney disease. So, talking to someone who's gone through this journey successfully gives hope. It ultimately gives hope. And so that's what we've done, is kind of created this army of people who have been through it, who want to pay it forward, who want to share their knowledge. And it would, to me, it's a natural evolution to be able to offer kind of this type of buddy system that you described. Now, we're not medical experts, but we do know what we didn't know. We do know, and we do also talk to each other, so we have this large network and we understand, that one hospital may provide service or care in one way and another hospital may provide it in another way. And patients need to ask these questions and get informed, and not necessarily accept a situation that they know someone else maybe navigated in a better way or in a different way.
Yeah, or someone that can just help them navigate through the quagmire of information and things that they have to do. And it's a lot. It's a huge undertaking. And by and large, as we said, most of the people who are undertaking this adventure are sick. They're not feeling well. They're not at their best. No, they're very sick. And, a lot of people, the problem with denial in kidney disease is that when we're going through the journey, we're given information about dialysis and transplant as if they're equivalent therapies, and they're absolutely not. Dialysis for the most part is a life support. It's a very invasive. I speak from experience. It's a very invasive therapy. You have no idea what it is until suddenly you're on it. Yeah. And, to understand that there is another option, which is transplant, which will give you almost a completely normal life other than taking some medications and getting
adjusted to those kinds of things and to do the kind of work that I'm able to do. And that's why, you mentioned at the top of the show that many organ recipients or transplant recipients really value how precious life is, and that's why you want to make the most of your health while you have it. So I've been unhealthy. I've been at the place where you can barely get up in the morning, and to have your health and to have your energy back is such a gift, and you don't want to lose that. I mean, that's one of the things I told my daughter when she was going through it. It was tough because she was 28 years old and just starting her life. And, the only positive thing that I could say to her is, this is going to give you such a different outlook on your life that many people don't ever realize, just how precious life is. And that is a gift, to look at life in that way. That it's not worth, don't waste a day of it. That's kind of a gift. Yep. We have to find these silver linings and things. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start this, really an advocacy group, that can help we can help each other, and we can really work to improve care and access to care and access to information together. That we are very powerful, together. One of us can't do a lot, but together we can really make a difference for other people, I think. For sure.
And Melody Klassen, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, she's a kidney recipient twice over. And she says, look, dialysis is a way to keep you alive, but it's no way to live. It really isn't.
No, and there are exceptions to every rule, and I do know some individuals who have done very well on dialysis, but I know more who haven't. And personally, it was the hardest time in my life. Like, the year I spent on dialysis was the hardest time in my life.
Well, the time commitment alone is ridiculous.
Yeah, the time commitment, the vulnerability, the fact that you are relying on a machine to live. Just, I had a permanent catheter in my neck. They insert it in your neck if you're an emergency dialysis start, which I was. And it means that you can't lie. You can't lie down. You have to wear turtlenecks all the time. Like, you can't get it wet. Like, it's such a, it's just such a,
it's invasive and
it's invasive.
Yeah, it really is.
Completely invasive. I don't know why. Maybe I read too much Margaret Atwood, but I felt like it's kind of like a cyborg, honestly. Like, that's how I felt. Like, it was just like, I don't even know if I feel human anymore. And that was just me. And I know, a lot, it is a bridge. It is a bridge that keeps people alive and hopefully gets them to something better, which is transplant. And we do want to see more people getting transplant. And more people can get transplant. There's extended criteria that allows people to get transplants well into their 70s. And extended criteria for donors that allows them to donate if they're healthy into their 70s. I mean, it's not a young person's treatment anymore. If you're otherwise reasonably healthy, a transplant is something that, almost anyone can look toward if they, if they think about it early enough, right? The longer you're on dialysis, then you can get sicker and develop other issues that may make you ineligible. But, if you think about it, early enough, there's a good possibility that, you can get to that. And if you push for it, right? So one of our mantras as a group is really transplant first. Think about transplant first, ask about transplant. That was what I used to again tell my daughter, like, every time you go for your appointment, tell them you want a transplant. Make sure they know, I want a transplant. I want a preemptive transplant before dialysis. I want to have a family. Tell them that every time you go, because you're always talking to someone different. And you want it in your chart, and they're like, I already told them that. I have to tell them that every time. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You tell them that every time, right?
Can't say it enough.
Yeah, exactly. And be motivated and and follow their directions and, take the medications. They keep you strong and alive. And, medications are good if they're serving a purpose, right?
Yeah, for sure. So how many people in Canada are suffering from kidney disease?
They say it's roughly about 2 million.
Yikes.
Yeah. It's increased. The incidence of kidney disease has increased by 31% in the last decade alone.
Wow.
And there's some new information out by government data organization called CIHI, Canadian Institutes of Health Research, just published a last 10-year look at kidney disease in Canada. And there's some pretty, startling numbers in there. We know that as you age, your kidneys decline naturally, like a lot of things, like a lot of things do as you age. But also diabetes, if it's not well managed, will contribute to kidney failure. High blood pressure, if it's not properly managed, will contribute to kidney failure. And so all of these things, has really brought us into, what many are calling like a kidney disease epidemic, kind of a silent epidemic. Mm-hmm. If you're an end stage kidney failure and you don't know it, often, as my nephrologist told me, you will have a heart attack because if your kidneys aren't working, then the toxins will build up and shut down your heart. And, and then it will be perceived that your death was caused by a heart attack, and there would be no point in looking at the underlying cause, which could have been kidney related. Right. So, again, it's just, a cautionary tale to look after yourself and not just from a kidney perspective, but if your blood pressure is a little high, look after it, get it looked after, manage your diabetes. These can all have ripple effect in your life. The other thing a lot of people don't know is, acute kidney injury can often be caused by, a medication or an infection. So Advil, actually overuse of Advil. And if you read your Advil bottle, it'll tell you that, ibuprofen can be harmful for your kidneys as well. So something to be aware of. And I know a couple of people who have had kidney failure because of overuse of ibuprofen. Sometimes, athletes really use a lot of ibuprofen and stuff like that.
Yeah, they do, because they're looking for an anti-inflammatory and they're looking to get back on the ice or on the field or whatever their sport is as soon as possible. And sometimes in order to do that, you have to have the different medications that will allow you to get back out there.
Yeah, and I remember my nephrologist saying to me early on when I was first getting, when I was just being monitored for the first kind of 10 years before I had to go on dialysis, and one of the things he said to me was, if you ever take Advil, don't bother coming back to see me. And I'm like, okay, well, that was a strong statement. Acetaminophen, Tylenol's all fine, but if your kidneys are slightly impaired, then Advil's only going to make that worse. So
yeah, it's
something
actually
a lot of people don't know.
Yeah, it's ibuprofen.
That's right.
Yeah,
ibuprofen. Yeah,
like acetaminophen. So anything like Aleve, ibuprofen itself.
Yes. Advil. Is the most common one.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, as soon as they bring out one of those medications that is that has the label on it that says anti-inflammatory arthritis medication, then anyone with an ache and pain on a rainy day takes it and doesn't realize that, that pamphlet inside that you're supposed to read that no one ever does is going to tell you some things that maybe you should read. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's probably good to have put your glasses on and have a look at it. Like for me, I always never want to put my glasses on and read the fine print, but sometimes it's very important to do that.
Yeah, especially if you have either you have, like you had, a family history or a propensity of some kind.
That's
and
right.
Injury to kidneys is something that people don't often think about either. Our kidneys are kind of protected and they're way at the back there, and we don't really give them much thought, but they can get injured in an accident just like anything else in your body can.
Yeah, for sure. They can get injury in action or by an infection or by,
Mm-hmm.
if you remember with COVID, like one of the symptoms in the early days of that was kidney failure.
Yeah.
Um,
And
you
kidney
know,
pain too, the backaches and things that arose in those days.
yes. Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
COVID's not over for anyone who thinks it is. After spending the weekend at Scarborough General Hospital visiting my aunt, I can tell you that COVID is nowhere near over. We're just not talking about it as much as we used to.
hmm Yeah, for sure. We're trying to manage it, but you're right. It's not over.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we will continue our discussion with Sue McKenzie. We're talking with Sue McKenzie, who is the president of the Kidney Patient and Donor Alliance of Canada. And they have the Transplant Ambassador program underneath that umbrella. And we're going to talk about that when we get back. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Bren Masson, host of Fresh Waves. April is Organ Donation Awareness Month in Canada, so we are bringing awareness to the airwaves with real-life stories of real organ donors, families who have made the difficult decision in moments of extreme tragedy to donate a loved one's organs, and organ recipients themselves. Join us on Fresh Waves. And go to beadonor.ca and register to be a donor today.
Today I'm gonna try change the world.
Hi, we're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Today we're speaking with Sue McKenzie. She's the president of the Kidney Patient and Donor Alliance of Canada. And if you haven't already done so, please go to beadonor.ca and register to be an organ donor. Not only will your organs be used when you're no longer using them, but there's all kinds of things that can be donated, like tissue, veins, eyes. There's all kinds of things. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about all these different aspects of organ donation and just bringing awareness to the fact that it's so important for people to go to beadonor.ca and register to be an organ donor. Heaven doesn't need your organs. We need them down here. So, Sue, tell us a little bit about this program called TAPS.
Sure. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. So the TAP is short for the Transplant Ambassador Program, which which actually founded and launched in 2017. And really, as I mentioned to you before in the first half of the show, that it was because I saw the difference that having an advocate made for my daughter, and I wanted that for more people. So we started TAP as it was actually part of a research initiative that was part of a national kidney research network called CanSolve CKD, the first national kidney research network in Canada that was funded by CIHR. I was the patient lead on a project called Increasing Access to Kidney Donation, which was led by a team out of London, Ontario, and Dr. Amit Garg. And there was a strategy province-wide. There are 27 renal centers in Ontario, and the strategy was implemented by the Ontario Renal Network, which is part of Ontario Health, to increase transplants in Ontario. And the Transplant Ambassador Program was a key pillar of that initiative. The other pillars were like increased education around transplant, some additional funding to inform patients about transplant. Some common metrics were developed across centers so that you could compare the performance of centers with each other around transplant and what they were doing, which actually didn't exist before. There were no comparables. So Transplant Ambassador Program started as a pillar. We actually started out in person in the clinics. So we have we're all patients. So we're either kidney recipients, kidney transplant recipients, or living kidney donors. We're actually just by serendipity half and half. Our program is made up of half patients and half donors. We have over 200 currently now in the province, and we're actually launching in Nova Scotia. But when we started out, obviously, we started out with a small group of probably around 30. We were actually in the clinics with these bright green vests. If you were to check out our website, it's Transplant Ambassadors, plural.ca. You'll see our vests. So we actually, we have these bright green vests that say, I'm a kidney recipient or I'm a kidney donor. Talk to me about transplant. And that was the idea, that people could see that patients who were in these clinics, whether they were pre-dialysis clinics or dialysis clinics, could have the opportunity to see and talk to kidney transplant recipients and living kidney donors throughout their journey. I know when I had when I was getting sicker and before I had my transplant, I was being put with sicker and sicker people. So every time I went to clinic, everyone around me was as sick as me or sicker. And I never saw anybody that was healthy, and I never saw anybody that had a transplant. And so our goal is to kind of normalize the idea of transplant, so that you would see patients who had successful transplants, and you would see donors who had given kidneys and had great things to say about that experience. We're proud to have done that, and we're still living very healthy lives. And that was really important. For me. And so we were incorporated into the ORN strategy and really embraced by the majority of the hospitals in Ontario. Once COVID hit, because as organ recipients, we are immunocompromised to some extent. So obviously it didn't make sense for us to be in the clinic anymore. And in fact, all volunteers were pulled out, whether we were, kidney patients or not. And that's when we really, again, there was a bit of a silver lining in that we really enhanced our online presence. So we developed a directory of ambassadors that you can kind of go to and have a look at any of the ambassadors. And you can there's actually a legend that will tell you, you could pull up all the kidney donors, you could pull up all the kidney recipients, you could find out which kidney recipients were on dialysis. You could find out which kidney recipients also maybe had diabetes, or which ones have had children since they had their transplant, or which ones have had children since they donated, whatever it is that you're looking for. So you can look for someone who is like you. And that was always really important to me, because, when I was going through mine, I was a young, working mom. I didn't want to talk to a 70-year-old person, who would have had a different experience than me and wouldn't understand what I was going through. So I would have wanted to talk to someone like me. And through our directory, you can do that, and you can actually reach out to them directly. So we have a number of videos on there. You can watch their videos, or you can send them an email. We provide all of our ambassadors with a transplant ambassador email, so you can email them directly from our website. And and we've just had some really, really great success with that model. I think in today's environment, with our healthcare system so burdened, and kind of really, we all know that we haven't really recovered from the COVID, all of the, the problems with COVID, that having, patients engaged as part of the solution and sharing their information on part of the circle of care, which we really are in these hospitals. It's a really innovative kind of way to support patients when a lot of supports are being taken away. Mm-hmm. And we're super passionate about being able to do that. We're all police. We all have vulnerable sector police checks. We do, we go through extensive privacy and confidentiality training, and we share with each other across the province successes and challenges. And we also share the challenges that patients come to us with in our conversations. We share it back with the hospital team, and without mentioning their name, the patient's name, to say, this is what we're hearing from patients. We're hearing that their donors aren't getting called back, or we're hearing this or that. And so then we can actually problem solve with the care team around some of these issues that we're hearing from patients. So it's very much, boots on the ground, understanding what's happening and being part of that solution. And I think that's been really important. So TAP has really grown. We also, because we're a patient run organization, patient managed, we heard from a lot of patients that they were really struggling sharing their story with their family, their friends, and their extended network about needing a kidney transplant. They were worried that they would be perceived as asking someone for a kidney. They didn't understand the gravity of that ask. They didn't understand the risk that they might be putting someone under. And there was just such a lack of understanding around that. And so we often connect patients with the donors so they can actually talk to the donor about what did you go through? How did you do? Like, have you had any after effects? All of those kinds of things so that they can feel more comfortable having those conversations. And we always, as part of our program, talk about that as the big tell rather than the big ask. In the US, they call it the big ask. Like, will you give me a kidney? Which frankly really never happens. No one really comfortable doing that. We're all Canadian. We're not really comfortable with that. We really encourage people to think about it as the big tell. Like, share your experience with your family, share with your friends as much as you're comfortable. Like, to them, you look the same. They may know that you have kidney disease, but they may not know that you're getting sicker because you oftentimes don't look sicker. You look the same. It happens. You get sicker over time and you look the same. So your family's not going to know where you're at unless you keep them posted on it. Your friends, your extended networks. A lot of donors, like if you go to the Kai report, you'll see that 30% of kidney donors are living donors and almost half of them are unrelated. So there's a lot of people that would really surprise you. Like, did I think that my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, who I barely knew, who I saw once a year at a family reunion, would go forward to be my donor? Never in a million years. Never. And that she would be a match. I mean, it just goes to show, and all he did was share that I was going to need to go on dialysis, and, or what can I do, right? That's what she said. And at that point, all you really have to do is give them the donor coordinator's card and say, well, you can call this person and find out more if you're interested in finding out more. And then it's over to them to decide what they want to do. And as I mentioned before, I never really know where they're at as the patient, where they're, like, whether they proceed, where they're at, any of that kind of stuff. But since that was such a barrier for patients, was that conversation, then we actually launched a new site on it's actually a page on our website called Patient Seeking Donors. So Patient Seeking Donors is actually the first ever in Canada platform where you can post on a secure server without giving your personal information out, like your phone number and email. You can post it, you're looking for a kidney donor. So we have about 70 plus profiles on there. We just started last July. We launched that site. And again, we launched it pretty quickly. Like, it was under development for about 3 months. We thought, people need this. This is a service that isn't out there. Let's do it. And now we have actually donors going to that site and reaching out to patients to find out more. And we actually almost had our first transplant of people who met on that site last month. But the patient was actually called in for a living donor before for a deceased donor before they were able to proceed with that transplant. So now that donor's reached out to someone else on our site, and we actually do a lot of promotion of that site with the media, and we've got some free Google ads and stuff like that. So we really want to drive people to that site, whether they're patient looking for donor or whether they're a potential donor who's, thinking, this is something I think I could do. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't anything like that. And as a patient group, we were able to get that up and running pretty quickly because we saw the need. And I think that's the power. Like, to me, that's just an example of the power that we have as patients who really understand this and who can organize and mobilize around an issue. So that's just one solution, but there's so many more that I think we can, that we can make happen in the future.
And the patient has such a unique credibility that a medical person does not. The medical people have their own credibility, of course, with science and the background and everything that they do. But a patient who has been through it offers a unique perspective that the medical community cannot. And that the fake world of Hollywood cannot. I mean, you look at these shows on TV and stuff, and, you know, Grey's Anatomy, one comes to mind, where people have major brain surgeries and they wake up and the next day they're talking to everyone around them and they're making perfect sense, and you get no idea. Yes, that surgery has taken place, but the recovery, you have no idea of the recovery. I know a person who was a kidney donor, is a kidney donor, and she said she had no idea what the recovery process was really like before she had that surgery, and she wished that she had. So I think there's a need and a place for your organization, and I think it will serve a vital part of the whole process. It's a wonderful initiative.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And, you know, just to be clear, we're not out there pushing transplant.
No.
You know, we are out there sharing our stories, the positive and the negative. And so, you know, if you talk to any of our donors, they're going to share with you exactly what they went through. They're going to share what they experienced.
And they might say to you something as simple as, that's completely normal and this too shall pass. Everything will work out. And just knowing that you're not alone, that other people have experienced the same thing. We know that kind of thing works, and we know how supportive it can be. That's why we have Alcoholics Anonymous, where they get together as a group. They don't tell you to sit at home and read something on the internet. Oh, here's your piece of paper, take it home. They sit together. Community works for us as human beings. We're social animals, and we need the support of a community.
Yes, exactly. No, that's exactly that's the underlying premise. And I think, you know, for patients, you know, there's support out there. I'm not going to suggest that there isn't. There are various groups that support patients, but I think we are uniquely positioned to identify the gaps in that support. What support is missing? Like, for example, you know, the patient seeking donor site that I just mentioned, you know, potentially, you know, looking at, you know, a kind of a navigator, you know, / buddy program that, you know, where you could come to the Patient Alliance and find somebody who could, you know, help you. You could talk to. They may not be able to go with you to all your appointments, but you could call them afterward and say, you know, these are the notes I took. Here's what I heard. You know, what are your thoughts on this? That's really invaluable, especially for all of the people who live alone, maybe don't want to burden their families with what they're going through. We hear that all the time. You know, people don't want to burden their spouse, or they don't want to burden their children, and they're really going through this alone. And to have somebody to talk to that gets it, like, when we talk to patients, and a lot of our work is virtual now, but we are starting to go back into clinics. You can hear the relief in their voice when you tell them that you've been through it. Like, literally their voice changes. And it's just an understanding, right? And that's very powerful.
Yep. Well, I tell you what happened on one of our shows about 6 years ago. We were in the studio when now we are all working from home, but at the time we were in the studio. There were 4 different people in the studio, all organ recipients. And the one was a friend of one of the people that was there. So there was a pretty big disconnect there. Like, we wasn't a close friend of anyone in the room. And just had a really interesting story of his transplant. And so, you know, we hear all these great things, and then I say to him, so how was your transplant experience? And he said, oh, well, I died twice, and then this happened and that happened, and I was hospitalized again. And for the whole first year, I don't remember anything. I was in and out of hospital all the time, and I had a rejection episode, and I just feel really alone, and I'm not sure this is actually really going to work. And it was horrible because none of us were expecting that. We were all expecting this big rah sis boom ba. I'm out there doing dragon boats and stuff. And so this poor fellow, he was having a really tough time. And one of the other people that was in the room said, hey, buddy, you're not alone. You said there's a group of us transplant people. We all meet once a month on Thursdays or something at this pub. Here's the address. Join us. And all of a sudden, within a few minutes, he had a community and he wasn't alone anymore. And yeah, his story was pretty damn miserable, but at least he had people to share it with. At least he could speak about it. At least he could have someone who might reach out a hand and say, that similar thing happened to someone I know and this is what they did. Maybe you want to talk to them. And before you know it, you have a whole support network.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think, and we do talk to patients who are struggling. Like that's what TAP talks to. Is we generally talk to patients who are struggling with their illness and alone. We talk to donors mostly who just want to talk to another donor and understand from their perspective what they went through. But it's just so true how important that sense of community is. But what we also find is that patients can sometimes be, some of that denial comes from not wanting their disease to define them.
Exactly.
Because we are so many other things, right? Like I am not kidney disease. I'm not defined by kidney disease. Yes, I mean, I've done some work in this space and I believe that there's much, much more work to do and that we as patients are uniquely positioned to do this work. So I feel called to do it, but I don't define myself by this disease. And we all come to this, all of us as patients or donors come to this with all of the other skills and attributes and amazing qualities that we have. And I think what we're trying to do is just put those skills to use, to make things better for other patients. And that's sharing our experience, but it's doing lots of other things. Like talking to the media, like, organizing, other initiatives, like on the Kidney Alliance, we are looking to develop a speakers bureau of patients who are, who are really comfortable and good at talking to the media about these issues. That's a special talent, which many patients and donors already have and already do. And so let's utilize, those talents, to help other people. And, our group really is about empowering patients, to be much more than their disease, but to be able to help other people. Because that community is so important and because we understand what each other's going through. And I know there's so many people out there now who are going through it alone and just kind of going to their appointments and going home like I did and going on with their life as if they're not sick. And that's a mistake. Because you've got to get control of it. You've got to get informed. You've got to talk to somebody, even if you never need a transplant, but you know that you're in kidney decline, get informed, get knowledgeable. A lot of the patients we talk to don't even understand that you can have a transplant before you go on dialysis. So if you know that, then you're going to talk to people in your networks long time before you even need dialysis. And that's good. I mean, it's good because it raises awareness. It's good because you're not so sick that those discussions are hard to have because you're still reasonably healthy. It's good because there may be people who say to you, gee, if you ever need that, come to me. Right. And maybe you won't need it, or maybe you will need to come, to regroup with them in 5 or 10 years. But you've had some of those conversations, and those are good conversations to have.
Absolutely.
And there's lots of people who, come forward to be donors for someone, maybe get rejected, and actually then think about donating to someone else.
Yeah.
So they may get rejected because they're not a match, or or maybe the person, isn't eligible at the time or for transplant, but they end up donating to someone else. And we see that a lot as well, because they were inspired by what kidney donation does and the idea that you can actually save someone's life. It's how often do you get the chance to do that?
Well, I think too, that also plays into awareness for the kidney pools, where you may not be a match for that person, but you're a match for that person over there, and that person's sister was going to donate to them, but she's not a match, but she's a match for you. And before you know it, there's the pool of the 4 or 5 people involved, and kidneys get exchanged, and everybody's happy.
That's right. Yeah. Like, I mean,
oversimplification.
That's right. And those chains are incredible and amazing. And we do have lots of people who've had experience in those chains. So if someone comes forward and it's not a match, then they can go into those chains. But there's also the opportunity to talk to other people in your family who might be a match. There's also, and if you're not, paired donor exchange may not be for everyone. And now if you're interested in being a living donor and giving to someone directly, you can come to our Patient Seeking Donor site and look at all these amazing stories. Before, a lot of people who were interested in being kidney donors would go to social media and try to find someone on social media who might need a kidney. And that can be hard as well. But, there are such amazing people out there. And, our 100 kidney donors in our program, each one of them, just their stories are just incredible. They're just incredible, amazing people. And there are so many more people out there. And a lot of times these donors are saying to us, I never even thought it was a possibility. I never even imagined it. And then once I got this idea in my head, of course I was going to do it. Of course I was going to proceed if I could do it. But people just don't understand that it's possible.
Yeah, well, that's what building awareness is all about, right? And I think too, awareness when you can show someone what a productive and wonderful life you're living, and even if you're not a rocket scientist or you're not the president of an organization, if you're just a good person living a good life who's got kids and grandkids, nieces and nephews, and you're a upstanding citizen, these are what inspire people to actually go to beadonor.ca and say, look, if I'm not using my organs anymore, maybe somebody else can, because they can have a life. And it makes people think twice when they're standing in front of a person who has benefited from organ donation, who is telling them how important it is to be an organ donor.
Yep. Yeah. And they're, we're just everyday people, that you see every day in the grocery store, probably in fast, and you have no idea of the thousands of people who've been impacted positively by organ donation and by choice that somebody made, to either donate their organs, after they die, or to donate them while they're here. It is incredible. And the operation now is so successful, right? Kidney operations, transplant of the kidney is, 99% successful, right? It's such a successful, transplant, like such a successful surgery. When my dad had his kidney transplant in Toronto in 1975, there was a 50% chance of surviving just the surgery. I mean, we've come so far. In terms of kidney donation, it's not something to be afraid of anymore. It's not Frankensteinian, like some people think, oh my goodness, a transplant, it's healthcare, it's progression, it's how we've advanced as a society to be able to, help other people and to allow these thousands and thousands of people to have better lives. So it's really, truly incredible, when you think about it.
It certainly is.
Transplant's only really been around for, 40 to 50 years at the most. And all of the people who have benefited from it, it's quite incredible.
It's remarkable indeed. Well, thank you for joining us today and helping to spread awareness about organ donation and kidney disease and about the different organizations that are available for people to check out. So if anyone's out there and they've been listening to our little talk today, how do they get a hold of you, or how do they find out more about the Kidney Patient and Donor Alliance of Canada?
Thank you. You can go to kidneyalliance.ca. We just launched our website earlier this month and see the many ways that you can get involved and work with us to help other patients make a difference. And you can contact me at susan@kidneyalliance.ca.
Perfect. That's
and
just
thanks for
great.
having me, Bren. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that April is busy for all of the people involved in organ donation awareness, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Well, that's it for Fresh Waves today. We were speaking with Sue McKenzie, who's the president of the Kidney Patient and Donor Alliance of Canada. And if you'd like more information, you can go to their website and check out all the things that they do. Also, please, if you haven't already done so, go to beadonor.ca and register to be an organ donor. That's all for Fresh Waves this week, but we will talk to you again next week on Fresh Waves. Have a great day, everyone.